Troy was released in 2004 and was directed by Wolfgang Petersen. It stars Brad Pitt, Orlando Bloom, and Eric Bana, and follows the story of the Trojan War as told in the Iliad. After Paris of Troy destroys a truce between Sparta and Troy, an entire war breaks out between all of Greece and Troy over one woman. Troy is a film that I've always really enjoyed. I'm a huge fan of the historical epic from the 50s and the 60s, and during the early 2000s, when there were many historical epics that were released, I think Troy is the closest we have gotten to a historical epic that feels like those old school epics from the 50s. There's just something about the filmmaking and the set design that really evokes those early epics, and I think that makes Troy stand out from all the rest. Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, and Alexander, and I think it's why I really love this film so much. So as always, let's talk about what I love. Now, I want to get into the technical stuff first, because that's really the stuff that I really love the most, because this feels so much like a big giant historical epic from the 50s. The filmmaking is so good in this. I love the production design, the costumes, the sets, and the cinematography. They all blend together so well to make something that feels like something that I would be watching in the 1950s. It feels like a Ben-Hur or a Ten Commandments in just the way it looks. There are shots in this film that look like they are from the 1950s. It just does such a good job of looking like an epic and not as much like a modern one. But yes, I love the design of this movie, the interior design in particular, the streets of Troy, inside the palace of Troy itself, the costumes in particular. I love how intricate they are. I love the armor that the Trojans wear. It's just so really cool and extremely detailed. I love those little things, and they really make me love the film in a very different way than I would love any other particular film, because I don't think the characters in particular in this story are that deep. There are two major exceptions. I think Eric Bana gives an extremely underrated performance in this film as Hector of Troy. He is fantastic, and I think he has the most depth to him, as well as the most emotional scenes of the film. He just gives such life to this character, and like, he sells it in every scene. I love Eric Bana, but I think this is a very underrated performance from him. He is kind of the emotional core for me in this film. And also, I love seeing Peter O'Toole in this film. He is so good, and it's surprising because I've heard rumors that he was actually drunk for most of the time on the set, but honestly, he still turns out a really good performance. I love the scene near the end where he goes to reclaim Hector's body after Achilles has just killed him, and it's a very emotional scene that is taken directly from the Iliad, and I think they really do that scene some justice. Not only is the dialogue just superbly done, but I think the acting is really good. Even from Brad Pitt, who I think is kind of a weak link in this film. He is kind of our main protagonist, but I just don't buy him in this role as much, especially during the big emotional scenes. There are some scenes in particular where he is really good, specifically in this scene, and these two in particular are just great. But the rest of the supporting cast is also really good. Brian Cox as Agamemnon, Brendan Gleeson as Menelaus. They're all so good, and such great kind of antagonists for this film. Sean Bean as well as Odysseus, even though he doesn't have that much to do. I love his introduction scene, and I just like seeing him in this film. I like seeing all these actors in this film. They work so well off of each other. They're so much fun. I also really love the score of this film. James Horner did the score after the original composer was told to leave by the studio, and he did such a phenomenal job. I love the soundtrack of this film, and it's just something that I can sit down and just listen to over and over. And my favorite piece of score is honestly the most simplistic, which is during the battle or the fight scene between Achilles and Hector. I love how tense it is during this scene where we're watching two giants fighting against each other. It's just so incredibly cool, and that scene is, again, extremely heartbreaking with the fall of Hector and Eric Bana. But yeah, that stuff is great. I love the sack of Troy, which is really intense with so many horrible things going on. We're getting people being hung, people being set on fire, women being kicked in the stomach, and babies being taken from their mothers and thrown on the ground. It's very intense, extremely violent, and I kind of loved every moment of it, not gonna lie. The battle scenes are also superbly done, extremely epic, and again, it's all because of the cinematography, the set design. The production as a whole is just extremely cool. Also, some little bits of trivia that are really cool about this film. Apparently, Christopher Nolan was almost given this film before he did Batman Begins, and Wolfgang Petersen was originally working on Batman v Superman, and I kind of like it how they switched roles in a way. Overall, would it have been cool to see Christopher Nolan tackle this film? Yeah, but honestly, I like what he did, and I like what Wolfgang Petersen did in this film, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. As for negatives with this film, I have quite a few, but nothing that really takes me out of the experience of this film overall. I do think that they really skimp out on character when it comes to Paris and Helen of Troy. The actors, Orlando Bloom and Diane Kruger, do an excellent job with what they're given, but they're just not given with much. And honestly, they kind of fall in and out of the film throughout a lot of the film. There's moments where, you know, the story is really about them, but they're not in the film that much, and they're not given that much material, which was kind of disappointing because their love is so central to the story that they don't have much of a bigger part. And of course, I mentioned it already, but Brad Pitt does have some great scenes with him, but overall, this character, Achilles, is just kind of bland in a lot of ways, but I still enjoy watching him nonetheless, and the scenes that work really do work. Now, also, this is a criticism that a lot of people have that are, of course, big fans of the Iliad and want to see Achilles and Patroclus as they're shown in the Iliad being lovers. And I completely understand it would have been great if they had gone that direction, but I'm not going to get mad at the film for changing it because it's an adaptation and there are liberties that an adaptation can do. They instead make Patroclus Achilles' cousin, so in this respect, there is something that they can do here. They can still give us the same emotion and the same relationship, only through a cousin instead of a lover. But they don't really develop it this much. Patroclus is kind of a nothing character. There's nothing really to him. He's not that interesting, and when he finally dies, I don't feel anything. And so the reason to give him a cousin, it doesn't help in any way, and I think even if they made them lovers, it still just wouldn't work. This character would have been extremely bland nonetheless. And so either way, I think with the script that we had, it just wouldn't have worked. Also, this criticism is only applied to the director's cut, but to me, it kind of ruins my favorite scene of the movie, which is the fight scene between Achilles and Hector. As I said earlier in this review, that the original composer left the project after his score just wasn't really loved by anybody. And so, with the director's cut, Wolfgang Petersen took out pieces of James Horner's score, who did the score later on, and he replaced the awesome soundtrack that is played during that fight scene with music from the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes. And the music's good, but it just doesn't work with this scene. It doesn't work with the rest of the soundtrack, which is very different from this extremely bombastic music. It just doesn't fit overall. So, which cut of the movie do I prefer? Do I prefer the theatrical cut or the director's cut? Well, I really do enjoy both, but I do have to say that I think the director's cut overall is a much better movie. I think it does a better job of portraying the characters. It gives them more meat to chew. It adds a lot of more scenes that are really enjoyable and I think add to the story overall. It's also the cut of the film that the director, Wolfgang Petersen, prefers, and the director's cut overall is a better film for the most part, but I still have a lot of love and admiration for that theatrical cut, as it was the first cut of this film that I ever watched, and I always did enjoy that. Overall, guys, Troy is a really fun film. I love how it feels like a love letter to those old school epics in the way that it is filmed, the way it looks, the costuming, the production design, all of that. It also has some really underrated performances in Eric Bana, and the rest of it, there are problems. Some characters aren't given that much to do, such as Paris and Helen. But overall, I think the experience is still really enjoyable. I love this film so much, and yeah, I do like this movie more than Gladiator. Gladiator may overall be a better film, but I find this film just so much more interesting to watch. So anyway, with all that said, I'm going to give Troy an 8 out of 10. Well, guys, I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for watching the first review of 2021. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next review.